a number of these photographs, about 26 of them, for a narrative photo documentary website called socialdocumentary.net. And I entitled it Cuba, Story, and Community. And so the exhibit abstract says, daily Havana tumbles life onto the streets, where bikes, wagons, and hawkers of handmade brooms fill streets too narrow for the painted cars of the 1950s. At midnight, I lean from a shaky balcony, drawn to a party trumpeted by a band from a corner house. The barrio sleeps and sings at night. Rains come and go. People wait by day in thought and shadow for something unexpressed. Cubans are patient and used to disappointment and overripe fruit. Tourists bring nostalgia for a simpler life, neighbors looking out for each other, and time to just be. The idea of disconnect with a capital D reflects both a time warp and Cubans' ration on virtual constant contact. Patterns repeat themselves in metal and metaphor. Grids, a scrapped bed spring by an ornamental grill. Lacework at a window, neighborhood networks. The web of woven patterns that record history and keep people inside and out. The past and the future resound. Juana, touching her wedding band, recalls a childhood of poverty. My landlady holds her first grandchild, and I'm invited to be a small part of their stories. And so my photographer's statement for that particular narrative body of work is this. I visited Friends of Friends this fall in a Cuban barrio and photographed in color for a change. I do usually photograph in black and white. Throughout this first trip, I met artists and had the freedom to walk the streets alone and with locals, staying in a casa particular with a woman who became a friend. My local friends live down the calle. Alejandro, who fought in the revolution, is a self-taught historian who lives with his wife Juana. It is their fourth floor, partly lit staircase I climb to visit them, as the phone they share with three others rings, and they call down Alfredo or Carolina and return to our conversation. Juana is analfabeta, or illiterate, since as a child she was a field worker by day and housekeeper until the evening. Then, if she had the energy, she could attend school for 1 hour from 8 to 9 p.m. While Alejandro also grew up poor, he was able to attend school through 4th grade and became a well-read citizen with a job. Alejandro is proud of Cuba's medical knowledge and critical of uncritical thinkers. There are long stories in these people's faces, as with all of us, and through them I more clearly understand my own story. I recorded interviews and street sounds and am forming this exhibit into a multimedia installation for a local museum and elsewhere to offer interaction with the Latino and other communities. And I'll be taking this work with me to show to people in July of 2014 to various cities in Western Europe, Brussels, Berlin, Frankfurt, outside of Paris, and Amsterdam. And you can find more of the photographs on the website socialdocumentary.net, and just type in Cuba, story and community. And my website is barbaratrachtenberg.com.
I'm Timothy Wilson, a photographer and a colleague. Today I'm talking with Barbara Trachtenberg, who describes herself as a street photographer, artist, writer, and 30 years as a teacher and school psychologist. This is only the framework of Barbara's numerous accomplishments, one of which was her trip to Cuba in 2013, accompanied by a colleague from Mexico. She was able to establish friendships, and this comes through in her remarkable photographs of Cuba's citizens and their life. Barbara Trachtenberg plans to return to Cuba to show her work in a well-known Havana gallery next March. We will talk about some of these photographs today. Barbara, you describe your approach to your photography as an ethnographer. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I came into ethnography through my formal study academically of cultures, specifically Central Americans. And so it's a kind of storytelling which exists in the moment, and I become a participant observer in the moment, in my relationship with the people I'm observing and interacting with. So it's a double role that I have. I establish a relationship, and I don't think it out very much, however.
The fact that you establish relationships with the people you photograph is something that I don't see often in photographs of Cuba. Usually I see people as part of the scenery and, of course, the obligatory old cars, but you seem to get way beyond that. Could you talk a little bit about how you approach those relationships?
Well, I was lucky enough to have had a colleague from 30 years ago who introduced me to friends. So I got to know these people as friends of this friend. And I lived in what I would call the barrio, which is in Old Havana on a particular street. And every day, morning, afternoon, and evening, I would go back and forth, return to the Casa Particular, where I was renting from a woman in her home. And that woman is registered with the government and has a logbook, which she presents once a week. So I got to see this kind of daily intimacy in her home, would leave and say, bye, see you later. What time are you coming back? And she would worry about me. Which way are you going? But there wasn't anything to worry about because I had a particular guide, I would call him, who actually became a dear friend. And he took me to many places, some of which are represented in these photos, and some I went to alone.
Your photographs are not inherently political, but nevertheless you provide a context in your work that really gives a window into Cuban life and Cuban people. Could you talk a little bit about how you approach the scene of lives and their experiences?
Well, how I approached these varied scenes that seem to connect to each other at times is that I just wandered, and I often do that in any country. I just wander. If I see something, it's kind of like smelling cinnamon or something.
So this is your street photographer side.
It's very much my street photographer, and I don't plan to look for a story at all. I smell something figuratively that's going on in a person who's in his setting or her environment. And I'm curious about it, and I'm sometimes stymied by it, something that happened in other countries too. And so I hang around and hang around. I try to be unobtrusive. Of course, I have my camera. And as all street photographers do, we try to grab it.
I want to ask a follow-up question about the street photography part. For me, it scares me to death to think of taking someone's picture. That's why I'm not a street photographer. However, I wanted to ask, how do you approach a stranger to interact enough? Do you get permission, or do they see you with a camera and sort of participate willingly?
It's an eye contact. I'm lucky to have the Spanish language, but in other countries, like in Bulgaria, I don't even have the alphabet, the Cyrillic alphabet. But in a Spanish-speaking country, it's the easiest for me. I'm the most comfortable, and it's easiest for me to start a conversation. Nevertheless, in other countries, I can use body language, and I will do that. I will motion all kinds of gestures to indicate what I might be searching for, or that this child is so cute. This is your child, you know? And it's eye contact, but I'm not putting it on. I get very energized by strangers, and I don't know why.
This is very fortunate. You're very lucky to have that ability to be very disarming. And then you get down to work of photographing.
I become emotional. Something touches my emotions. That's the addendum to that.
You're also a painter, mostly in the abstract style. And I was struck the way your paintings speak to your photographic images. I want to read a quote of yours about your painting. You say, "I work in a kind of fear and excitement, fast and spontaneous, that frees me from thinking and takes me to the meaning I find in the works as they emerge." This process seems so different from the carefully composed photographs and the thoughtfulness of the photographs. How do you marry those two kinds of approaches to art?
Well, the paintings fills a need of mine to let go of all that thinking. I overthink a lot of things. I think I feel too much. I think too much. I do too much. But when I'm painting, I enter another world, and I'm much more, although I started with this kind of anxiety and excitement mixed together, once I get into whatever this abstract mess is, and it's often just a mess, and run up to the sink to wash my brushes unnecessarily and change the water prematurely, it's this physical activity of breathing that gets me into some deeper level of myself, and I don't think.
This is really interesting about the different approaches that you have to painting and photography. However, they speak to each other in a very interesting way. And when I was looking at your art and your photographs, your paintings and your photographs, I saw a real connection. Perhaps we could talk about a couple of paintings with the photographs.
That would be wonderful.